Hi, I'm K. Patrick Glover. You're watching Potluck. Today we're going to talk about some of the issues affecting the transgender community here in America. I have two guests. I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Lucas. My pronouns are them, they, or she, and I am non-binary.
Hi, I'm Audrey. I use she, her pronouns, and I identify as trans feminine and just overall queer.
Okay. So let's start with some definitions for the folks at home who aren't real familiar with what we're talking about today. For instance, what is the difference between transgender, trans feminine, and non-binary?
Well, they're all really under the same umbrella. Transgender means anyone in the trans community or any type of trans person. Being non-binary is a way of being trans, and being trans feminine is also a way of being trans. You can be, for me at least, being trans feminine means I'm trans in that I identify as feminine, and that is not how I was born.
Okay. How about you?
Yeah, I'm non-binary. I also kind of go under gender fluid because I don't honestly feel that I am male or female. I feel more female than male, but I'm just who I am. I'm me. So.
And gender fluid means
that you're just whatever, you know, like you feel like you're a boy one day, or you can feel like you're a woman one day, or, you know, so sometimes I feel like that, sometimes I feel like I'm neither.
Okay.
So I'm just kind of me.
Audrey, you've taken a new name.
Yes.
Lucas, are you still using your birth name, or is that a...
I just go by Lucas, though.
Okay. Talk a little bit about the concept of dead naming and why it's such a problem.
Dead naming is, for those of you who don't know, it is when you call a trans person by their given birth name, which is typically associated with the gender they were assigned at birth. And the reason that's a problem is not only can that be an invalidation of someone's identity or experience. If you go by a different name and someone doesn't call you that, they're not acknowledging who you actually are as a person. And it can also be painful because oftentimes we can have very traumatic associations with those names, even if nothing directly traumatic happens to us, because those names are a symbol of who we were forced to be or pretend to be for so long, which is a very painful thing to do. Being referred to by a name kind of brings that trauma back and brings that negative experience back and brings the pain of not being who you should be back, even when you're in a better place. For me, at least, if I hear or see my dead name referred to me anywhere, I just shut down. I have a good friend now who actually has what my dead name was, and that's the only way I've been able to not shut down just seeing it in general.
Okay. Lucas, talk about pronouns a little bit. Why is it so important that we get the pronouns correct?
Pronouns are correct because, like I said about the feeling female or male, whatever, it is like when somebody calls me a guy or sir or anything, I don't feel like I am a guy or like any of that. So it really hurts my feelings, and it makes me feel really bad when somebody does that to me. So it's kind of like dead naming almost to me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's very hurtful. Especially what I get a lot is I'll have to constantly remind people over and over and over and over again not to refer to me as a male, but they will still do it. So.
Now, I have seen at conventions and different events, people with name tags actually identifying pronouns on their name tags as a kind of a standard thing. Is there a way to let people in society, I mean, we can't all walk around with name tags all the time.
I just feel some people don't care. They're just ignorant and stuck in their own world, and which is fine. They can do what they want to do, you know.
I think a start could be, sure, you can't walk around with name tags all the time, but everywhere you do identify yourself, maybe put them in there. The college I go to now has faculty put their pronouns at the bottom of emails they send with their contact information. I've seen business cards with pronouns printed on them, obviously for specific people, not places.
They even have like work applications now that are doing a lot of that.
So it's getting better.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think what's important isn't to have them always be announced on a name tag all the time, because as you said, that's impractical, but just put them where you can, when you can.
Yes. And I heard that Maryland even did a non-binary, you can go and get a ID from them now in Maryland. That states it.
Yeah, you can get an X gender marker on your driver's license.
Yep, instead of male or female.
Interesting. What's your experience with your parents been? How have they dealt with this?
They're good overall, it just took them a while. I feel like, for me at least, the issue was that they kind of had grown to see me as a part of themselves, as an extension of themselves. Which, sure, being in a family, that's sometimes what it's like.
Yeah.
And when suddenly I revealed I was not the person they thought I was, there was some overall tension. They meant well, but they just didn't know much about the issues, so they ended up taking me to a very transphobic doctor for several years. And he basically did a lot of programming that we had to undo over the years. So we're good now, but it took a while to get there.
How old were you when you?
15.
15. How about you, Lucas? Experience with family?
It's been pretty good with my family. My dad isn't around anymore. My mom lives in Pennsylvania, but she's pretty nice about everything. My grandmother raised me, and it's like nothing ever. I'm just her grandkid, so
Okay.
That's how she looks at it. It's a lot more people, like my other grandmother, she's kind of weird about it. It's a lot of the people you wouldn't think that would be really weird about coming out and stuff that are really weird about it.
Extended family, grandparents, that sort of thing?
Yeah, like one of my grandmothers, she's just kind of like weird about it, like all the time, like constantly talking about me dating girls and this and that.
Do you have any relatives who refuse to acknowledge?
I have a very small family.
I have a pretty sizable extended family on my dad's side. There are some relatives who are trying, but they aren't trying very hard. There are a few who are perfect. These are the people I would not expect to be perfect, but they were great, and they're the only reason I have contact with the family at all, honestly. I have an uncle who either uses the wrong name and pronouns or doesn't even talk to me at all. He kind of avoids me at this point. And I have a huge extended family chunk in Texas that are just out of contact with us at this point.
Okay. Let's talk about friends. Do either of you have a group of friends from before you started transitioning, or that you're still friends with?
Yeah, I'm pretty much friends with everybody I've been friends with, and like gained more friends. I mean,
Did they have any issues?
no, they were all my friends were very like, I'm happy for you, and like I've always been kind of different, so they all were like, that's just Lucas anyway. So
Okay.
that's kind of how that was. It's been kind of easy for me.
Okay. How about you, Audrey?
I didn't have many friends before, but the few I did have, I still have.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about community. Is it something that you try to form networks of people, like-minded, like experienced, something as a kind of a support group?
Here and there, yeah. I mean, some people we're just all regular people, so it's like, I don't know what I'm really trying to say here.
I actually am president of my college's Sexuality and Gender Alliance, so I'm pretty plugged into our community there.
Okay.
And one thing I've noticed is a lot of people in that group have expressed that they didn't really have a group or people to hang around with or a place to fit in until they found us. And now we're basically just one giant friend group, even outside of meetings and stuff. So I think having like-minded individuals and similar experiences, even though our experiences are so different, there tend to be common threads. I think that tend to create an attachment between people, even if you don't fully know each other yet, because you know you have something in common.
Right. Okay. Let's switch to a little uncomfortable topic for a minute. There has been a steady increase in reported violence against transgender and non-binary people. I think it's been around for a while, but it's certainly come to a head under the current administration. Over the last 7 years, I think the average is about 25 fatalities a year in the United States. Have you had any issues with assault or problematic people? Any time where you were in fear? Do you take any particular precautions to prevent that? How what I'm asking is, how big is that knowledge in your life?
Well, for me at least, I have never experienced any direct transphobic violence. I tend to kind of blend in more often, I think. I've had people who I know for a fact are transphobic because I overheard them saying something, then trying to be like flirtatious or whatever with me, so nothing there. But there are a few members of the community I'm in who have expressed moments where they've been walking home and had teenagers throw glass bottles at them.
Yeah.
Or one person got basically shoved off the top of a staircase at the mall and almost fell, and the security guard was just laughing his ass off. So it happens in the community I'm in. I'm very blessed to avoid it. And I think part of that's also because a lot of the violence unfairly targets black trans women. They tend to have a higher murder rate than other trans people. And so I think in a certain way, I'm privileged to be able to avoid some of that violence, but some of us very much aren't.
Any thoughts on that, Lucas?
Personally, I haven't had any physical violence, but I was in a relationship when I came out that kind of went sour, and that's really the only physical violence I've had towards me with my whole becoming who I am. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, when I go out of my house, I usually take some kind of protection, because you never know what's going to happen. But most of the time when I've had people start problems or anything with me is usually guys on the internet trying to hit on me, and when I tell them I'm not interested, then they get butthurt, and then they want to call me names, and then they want to attack me or whatever. And it's usually what it is usually when I'm not interested in said person, and then they get really crazy about it, is usually what it is.
Okay.
Because most of the time I think they're just insecure in their masculinity and in their own problems, so they get violent about it.
Considering how prevalent the problem is right now, what do you think some potential solutions or advice for folks to steer clear of this? What can we do to make things better than they are now?
I think one important thing that we as a country need to do is stop treating trans issues like a political issue. They cannot be something that one side agrees with, one side doesn't agree with. It's up for debate. Because whatever your thoughts on us are, we're just human beings trying to live our goddamn lives. And if people are trying to delegitimize that for political points, that's how people get hurt and killed.
Okay.
And I think we also need spaces where trans people can get away from the world of cis people for a while.
Now, what would that look like? How would you go about doing something like that?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Maybe some type of trans commune, I don't know. Somewhere where we can interact with the community around us and be a part of it, but at the end of the day, know we're somewhere that we're safe and that our existence isn't disagreed with or taken into question by a single person.
Okay.
Kind of a pipe dream.
You have any thoughts on how to start accomplishing something
No,
like
I
that?
don't. I guess just education about how people feel, because I feel like a lot of people are just uneducated and they don't understand.
Yeah.
So that's how it is. But like she said, we're just people, honestly, just trying to live our lives.
I think normally, you're thinking about safe spaces and community, one of the first things that come to mind are churches, but that would probably be problematic here. Are there any churches that
There is a church. I don't know what the name is, but I've been to one in Baltimore, and there is a church that is cool with the LGBTQ community down in Baltimore City. I do know that there is. I've been to it before. I just don't remember what the name is.
Okay. Maybe they'd be somebody they could talk to start looking for a space to set.
My parents are big churchgoers, and according to them, and from what I've seen, the Baltimore Presbytery in general tends to be very queer affirming.
I think that's what it was. Possibly.
That makes sense. I know they've had events for queer folks in the past.
Yeah.
Solidarity. What does that mean to you? What do you...
To me, solidarity means all of us who are marginalized, thrown out by mainstream society, or taken as a political pawn by various parties, need to stand together, both to fight for each other's rights, but also just to have each other's back. Like, Solidarity is the trans community and the immigrant community and the community of marginalized religious groups all standing together and saying, we're here for each other. No one's going to mess with you because they have to mess with us also. Strength in numbers.
Sounds like a good goal. Talk a little bit about your experience, the trans experience, the joy, the pain. What's
Honestly, since I've came out to be who I want to be and who I'm comfortable with being, I've felt more happier than I've ever felt in my entire life. Honestly, I haven't really had a lot of backlash from people. Just a lot of people has accepted it, and they're very happy for me, and I'm very happy also. So I'm very happy with just how everything's going.
How long ago did you come out?
About 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay. How old were you at the time?
I was 24.
24.
I had kind of a mixed experience so far. The joy, I think, the best thing about being trans is being part of such a wonderful community of people who all, maybe not always successfully, but all try to care for each other and be there for each other and fight for each other. And I think it's just nice to know that you're a part of that. I think the hardest part was either losing a bunch of family friends when I came out. There were a few friends of my parents that were dear to them that left our lives entirely, and I still blame myself for that on a certain level. And just knowing that to most of the country, I'm some concept and not a human being, or I'm some horrible...
Fetish.
Yeah, they think either I'm a fetish or a predator or a tool for political power.
It's
And
never
no one
anything
sees the
good.
human.
Now, is that because most people don't think that they know anybody who's transgender?
I think that's the problem, is a lot of people don't actually know anybody who's transgender, and they see all of like trans porn, and they see people like trans women on television, and they're always glamorous and so pretty and all that. And people are people, but that's not reality, you know.
From my experience, I can only speak for trans women right now, but for my experience, what I've seen with us is there are people like me who kind of slip through the cracks. There are people who are super attractive and they're basically fetishized. And then there are the people who don't follow conventional beauty standards and they're treated like utter garbage.
Thinking back, I know a lot of people who identify now as non-binary or transgender. 20 years ago, I couldn't say the same thing. 30 years, I couldn't say the same thing. Is it that it's more prevalent now, or is it that it's more in the open now?
I feel that it's more accepting now than it was like even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you know, and I kind of feel sadly that there is this trend of people coming out, though, that are trans or non-binary when they're really not. They're on a whole trend type thing, which I feel.
I mean, I get that, but I also think it's important for people to be able to explore their identity.
Yes.
And if that takes them to places where they're identifying as trans and then later go back, at least they know more about themselves and they've had more of an experience. I'd rather that than people feeling too afraid to express themselves at all and never finding out who they are. But when it comes to non-binary folks, I've seen interviews with lots of older people who have said, yeah, I'm non-binary, but I never had the words to say it before. I was in an event, Capital Trans Rights in 2019, where a woman speaking said, if non-binary had been more mainstream back when I was young, that's what I would have come out as. And I think that's what I still identify as mostly. And also keep in mind, a lot of cultures outside of our American culture now have had non-binary genders. A lot of indigenous groups in the United States and the rest of the Americas had a concept for people who didn't identify as either of the two sex genders.
Yeah.
So it's kind of new that we don't.
Back in the day.
So it's not new that we have non-binary, it's new that we don't have it.
Okay.
I think it's just that they made a word for it, honestly, because you've had androgynous people forever.
Yeah, that's how we used to refer to Dave Bowie.
Pete Burns,
Yeah.
all of them.
Is the language really important to this? Is the new words, is that helping?
It's showing respect. It's saying the identity that you use to describe yourself, the way you choose to show yourself to the world. I respect that. And as a part of that, I respect you as a person. If you're not respecting how someone's showing themselves to the world or how they're identifying themselves, then are you really respecting them as an autonomous individual human being? I would argue no.
I take that as utter disrespect when somebody doesn't call me by my pronoun, and especially when I've told them over and over and over again.
How frequently is that a problem anymore? Do most of the people in your life?
No, there's every single day I deal with it. Yeah, one of my roommates does it all the time.
I'm about 50-50.
Yeah, I'm like about 50-50. It just happens at least once or twice a day. And it's usually one of the people are usually somebody I've told numerous times.
Okay. How do you handle that?
I usually just stop talking to them and walk away, honestly, without me saying something bad.
Is it a forgetfulness on their part, or is it deliberate? Are they being...
I think it's forgetfulness and they don't care. I think that's what a lot of people's problem is. They just don't care. I think that's the problem
Wrapped
with
up
a
in
lot
their
of people.
lives.
It's just they're not really worried about other people. They're just worried about themselves. So
I think if someone consistently forgets the right pronoun for you, that's a sign that on a deeper level, they're still seeing you as belonging to that earlier pronoun. Even if they want to use your correct pronoun out of respect, they're not really seeing you that way, and that's why they're messing up.
What's the solution? How do we get people to take that more seriously?
Just got to keep talking to them and keep pushing back against abuse and forgetfulness and lack of caring, and keep making ourselves more visible. Outside of that, there's not much we can do.
Okay. Trans experience, you talked about with me earlier about it moving away from the mainstream. What do you mean by that?
I think there's an interesting aspect to the trans experience, and this is only speaking for the communities I've been a part of. This is not speaking in general. But in all the trans communities I've been involved in, everybody tends to be very outside of social norms in other ways, tends to be very kind of unique in how they dress, look, act, what their interests are. And I think the reason for that a lot of the times is if we're trans and we've transitioned and we're already outside that level of mainstream culture, we sort of have that door open to us now where we realize, hey, we've already been here once, it's okay to stay here out on the fringes just being ourselves. And I think there's an important part of that, because I think when you are pushed out of a mainstream culture like that, it's almost necessary to build up your own identity and your own group and your own community and culture for yourself.
As I was doing research for this show last night, I ran across the statistics for the violence. I ran across one other statistic which is extremely disturbing, and that is an incredibly high suicide rate among transgender and non-binary folks. I'm assuming that is a side effect of lack of acceptance. Has that ever impacted either of you? Friends that you've known, people you've known?
I mean, I attempted suicide once. I didn't succeed, but I tried.
Okay.
And yeah, the reason is when you see day after day that most of the people around you either don't care about your existence or actively despise it, and when you're painted consistently by one of the major political parties as one of the worst things to happen in this country, it just gets tiring. I mean, I'm in a much better place now. I'm happy. I have a good support system, but I'm still just so tired of it all. And so someone without those positive things to counterbalance, it makes sense why that would happen, unfortunately.
What would you say to somebody in that position right now?
I would probably just tell them that I was in the same position and I got out of it, and that they don't know what the future will bring, And so they owe it to their potentially happy future self not to rob that version of themselves of the opportunity to be in a good place.
Lucas, thoughts on that?
I'm pretty much on with what she said, honestly. I mean, I haven't had any friends or anything like that commit suicide from being trans or non-binary or anything. I mean, I know I've went through my depression with things. It makes things a little difficult sometimes because people they kind of look at you a little different. And then also a lot of times people don't honestly know what you're interested in or anything like that, so people kind of tend to stay away from you.
Yeah, you can be very much just seen as the token trans person and have any other part of who you are as a person ignored.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to thank both of you for coming out today. It's been a wonderful discussion. Viewers at home, you have been watching Potluck. You can find previous episodes of this show at potluck-online.org. We are going to put a little disclaimer at the bottom of this episode with a phone number. If you are in trouble, if it's getting you depressed, if you have feelings that are taking you to a dark place and need someone to talk to, there are people out there who will listen. Call that number, please. I'd much rather hear a good story about you than another statistic. Any last thoughts?
Keep living out of spite.
Yep. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you for watching.